Here we are again, Realms Deep in the Keep. We are joined yet again by Fred of 3D Realms. We've got Haducant, my producer here, and we've got the legend himself, Mr. Tim Willits. Thank you for joining us, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The interesting thing about this is that you were not one of the planned guests until I got told like last week, like, hey, Ty, do you want to do Tim Willits? And I'm like, is that even a fucking question? Like that, of course. And
who doesn't want to do Tim Willits, huh? Am I right?
That's funny.
No.
Yes. Well, I hope I didn't ruin your plans by like jumping in.
No,
it's like who invited that guy?
This has been a really interesting project because it's like, you know, it starts off with like, here's a list of people you're going to do. I'm like, cool, yeah, I'll take that on, no problem. And then it's just snowballed from there. And, you know, we get this opportunity, like we were talking to basically everybody that I've ever wanted to, like I had plans for years to kind of knock you guys all off the list. And then now we're going to do it all in one session. So I have to like double up my game and become like a 10 times better podcaster for it. So it's a good thing. But I know that you have been asked, as I said earlier before we started, every question known to man in regards to all the games you worked on. So I kind of want to get a window into who you are and where you are now, just as a person, because we only ever really get to hear about Tim Willits, the video game designer. Like, who's Tim Willits, the guy? You got a bunch of kids, dude. What's going on in your normal life?
I'm much shorter in person than I am on the internet. That's always my joke when people meet me. You know, I'm always like, yeah, I'm much shorter in person. I'm joking, but yeah, we can talk about anything.
Yeah. So, first of all, like, what's going on day to day right now? It's a crazy time in human history, and you're the. Let me make sure I get your business title right here. The chief
creative
officer. Okay, so what does a creative officer do? What does a chief creative officer do?
Man, everything. So we've been so busy, it's crazy. So last year, you know, after 20,000 years, I left in software and you know, joined Saber Interactive. So I worked with the team at Saber on Quake Champions. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I really, and it was just, at the time, it was just two guys that owned the company. And, you know, now Saber has been purchased by Embracer, so we're a much bigger company, which is exciting. But I loved what Saber did with all their games. You know, Saber works in everything from first-person shooters to sports games to truck simulation games to, you know, ports like you know, The Witcher 3 on the Switch. Mm-hmm. So it was really exciting to get a chance to work on so many different titles. So basically what I do is I kind of have the 50,000 foot view on kind of this creative strategy of the company. And you know, making sure that, you know, the teams are thinking about the things they need to think about, you know, working with the partners on whatever publisher that we're working on, working with our own publishing team, everything from game design to marketing to business to, you know, future potential, you know, ideas with other companies. So I do a little bit of everything, which is definitely exciting. And before the end of the world happened, I was traveling all over the place, because Saber has offices in Russia, mm-hmm. and Spain and Portugal and Belarus and Sweden. So before I was stuck at home, I would say I have the best job in the world. I get to travel to exotic places and make video games. This is awesome. Now I travel via Zoom to exotic places and make video games. So hopefully Europe will open up again, and I can get back to visiting the teams. But, you know, technology and working remotely, because I've worked with teams around the world for years. Worked with Avalanche and you know, Saber. You know, worked with Machine Games, our other Bethesda studios. Heck, In Software has a office in Frankfurt, Germany, and so I've gotten very comfortable working remotely. You know, because it is a little bit different. But technology has got to the point where we can really do anything remotely and work together, you know, via the software and the technology. So it is a little bit different, but it's basically the same. I know that was a very long answer to what are you doing today. but it's a little everything.
It makes for actual better clip content for the festival to just have you go on for as long as you want, because it's less cuts. Haducant gets to just like phone it in that day.
You guys are trading messages. This guy won't stop talking. Send. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's usually them sending the message to me and telling me to shut up. So
it's really fun to get to see you kind of work on projects other than what you're kind of famous for. We've known you all this time as like the first-person shooter guy, and that's been for 25 years, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere along.
Yeah, like 95 to yeah,
since I was born. And now you get to like oversee these projects that are wide arrays in video games. So like when you look down the barrel of something like, I don't know, WWE Battlegrounds, what kind of challenges, or maybe not even challenges, but what fun is it to kind of like look at something that's totally different than what you're kind of used to and apply your creative process to that sort of a game?
Yes. So looking at everything from SnowRunner to WWE, there are lessons from what we did at id for so long that do apply to really anything. Our games in the past were very fast, very precise. You had to educate players immediately about exactly what was going on. Feedback is critical in fast-paced arena games. So a lot of those lessons you can apply to these other games as well. Like for instance, if you've worked with me, you've heard me use this joke before. The worst part about animators is they like to animate, and a lot of times animators will make these really long, exaggerated animations. And in our games at id, everything had to be fast and quick. So I was always like, less animations, faster, snappier.
Yeah.
And that applies to other games as well. Get to the point as quick as possible. Gamers want to be engaged in the experience. So I think, I think those lessons that were so critical to first-person shooters can be applied to other games. I mean, even the gamification of how we reward people, you can see has gone across to many different platforms. And, sometimes a good idea in one genre can be just as good in another genre. It just needs someone to pick up that idea and carry it over. So hopefully at Saber, I can pick up ideas from one genre and carry them over to other genres.
Now, is Saber still involved in Quake Champions at this point? Are you actively working on it, or is it just?
Yes. So so that's Bethesda.
Okay.
That's all Bethesda. Once I wrap things up there, then it was easy for me to move over to Saber. So if you want to know about the future of Quake Champions, ask Bethesda.
We'll see what happens with it. But Quake Champions specifically brought a whole lot of us. Haducant and I are perfect examples of people who, played Quake probably in high school or something like that. And then when Quake Champions came out, it kind of brought us into the fold of, hey, arena shooters, this is still an exciting thing. I literally started this podcast directly because of Quake Champions. And,
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And then
it's funny you say that though, because I didn't start playing. I played Quake Champions first before I played Quake 1.
That's insane.
I didn't play Quake 1 until last April, first time.
The youth nowadays, huh?
You guys can yell at me all you want, but I've also put more times into like map editors for that game than I have actually played the.
It is interesting though that that game's been received, however people can interpret whatever they want from that, but it's been received the way it has, and yet there's such a tidal wave in the arena shooter community that started explicitly because of that game. People got into Quake Champions and they started discovering all the older games, like Quake, all the Quake, the whole entire genre. Xonotic really got a wave behind it for a little bit. Then we got Warfork, which was like a fork of, you remember Warsaw, and it's really interesting. It's still a super small, tight community, but I very much enjoy the fact that you guys took that risk and made it happen for us, because without that, we wouldn't be here right now. I would not be sitting here interviewing you.
Well, thank you. Yes, arena shooters in 2020 nowadays, they are pretty tough, and they are pretty hardcore. This guy that I worked with kind of summed up, how a game like Quake is viewed. Like, for instance, those of us that live in the Quake world, it's like living in a mansion. We love it. I mean, you've got chandeliers and gold staircases, and it's the most beautiful mansion in the world that we live in. Okay. But the people who don't live in the mansion outside look at it like a crack house, because it's like terrifying. It's so fast. It's so intense. And, if your skill's off a little bit, you will get destroyed. Which is thrilling and exciting. And watching an arena shooter competitively is the most exciting game to watch, in my opinion. But for people that have not grown up in arena shooters or don't really have that dexterity, it's also terrifying. And I think some of the challenges as the industry moves forward with hardcore competitive titles is how we can bring more players into it and have them be less scared. So that's definitely a challenge. And it's not just arena shooters. It's some games are becoming more and more hardcore, and as developers, we need to find ways to help people into our games.
Right.
Do you think the barrier of entry is one of the main challenges that arena shooters are facing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, like my kids. I have 3 kids that are 16, and I sat down with my son and I said, this is Quake, and this is how we play. And, just watching them just get shot from a different direction and just the frustration of the speed, it's definitely difficult. So yes, I do really think the barrier of entry is kind of the biggest hurdle that these types of games need to get over. Because once you get over that, and once you're in it, you love it. I mean, you love it. But it's just getting you to that place is a challenge.
Well, I'd love to hear your opinion just in general about like the main competitors in, you're talking League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Overwatch. To me, we're not the two of us, but we're not the same generation. But I was a young teenager when Quake came out, and looking at League of Legends and Overwatch and so on today, for me, I don't have any idea what's going on. It's just here's fireworks and colors everywhere, and watching that being played as an esport as well. I don't know what's happening, and I don't think I would have to invest too much time to learn. But a game like Quake Champions, I get it. Like, oh, here's a gun, run around, and if you get killed, you kill, and if you kill someone, you win.
So I have a theory about all that, and you guys can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Because I agree with you. When I look at MOBA style games like League of Legends, it's so confusing. It's just like, oh my god, just give me a railgun and let me go.
Yeah.
But millions of people follow this, and and I know that there's a dexterity component to those games, and the esport athletes that play those are true athletes. But the physical skill kind of dexterity of playing a Quake game is kind of like, watching stars play basketball. So, and I think when you watch something like League of Legends, you can see it as a mental game. Mm-hmm. And that most people believe that if they dedicate enough time and energy, they can mentally figure it out, and they can mentally, so they can know that it is doable. Okay. But when I watch, like Michael Jordan dump a basketball from the free throw line, I know that I will never be able to do that. Yeah. And when I watch, a pro Quake player do the shots and perform the actions that they're performing, I view it as a physical dexterity skill that I personally can never do. But I feel when I look at the other games that it's more of a mental exercise. So I feel that arena shooters are even more intimidating because there's almost this physical barrier to the challenge. Whereas some of those other games, which I understand that there's a physical challenge as well, but it doesn't seem the same. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Tell you from experience,
Absolutely.
having talked to people of my generation when they first see Quake, right? Because they're aware that it exists. So all of them know that Quake is a thing, but they literally, as you said, they actually look at it and say, "That's not even perceivable." Like I could never conceive of possibly doing that. It's almost a superhuman type thing when you see Rafa play Quake. When you see someone like Cygib, the way he moves around a map and the fast twitch muscle movement. And you don't see this in Counter-Strike. Someone falling off a 3-story building and like swinging around 180, one hitting somebody with a rail, popping out a rocket gun and start spamming the other team members. Like that is so much action in such a small amount of time that most people that are not privy to, their brain isn't used to functioning at that pace. It's just not something that they could really see themselves doing. When you watch someone play Counter-Strike, it's so grounded in realism that, I could see myself doing that in real life. I've played paintball before, of course. So I think that's where it comes from.
Yep. So I think that makes it more difficult.
And
yes. So I'm glad you agree. And again, I'm not trying to say that those games are easier to play. I'm just saying that there is a slight difference.
Do you think there's a fix for this? Because as I see it, the generation that grew up with Quake because there's nothing else like it. So you have millions of people all around the world playing Quake, and it was the same with all of the genre-defining games. Red Alert came out at the same time. Everyone played Red Alert. Everyone played Quake, and so on. Now it's different. So do you see any way to fix this? Because I know Quake Champions tried to do it in some way.
I know. Trust me, we tried to add the abilities and slow it down a little bit, and we tried to give people something to do that wasn't, just run and gun with and then our hardcore Quake people were like, "Oh, we hate abilities," but then once they played it, they're like, "Okay, I get it." Some people can say that we may not have gone far enough, but then we also did not want to alienate our hardcore Quake fans as well.
That's the thing. It's got to be hard to do. I remember when Counter-Strike Go came out, and 1.6 was what everyone was playing, and no one wanted to play Counter-Strike Go. And then was it Valve that made it kind of mandatory?
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Forced everyone kind of to go with Counter-Strike Go, and now it's the only thing.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. It's tough.
So I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
What if we had called it something different? What if we just,
I think it comes down to quality,
But it comes down to me whenever I try to show a game like this to any of like my classmates in college or whatever, because like I'm in a computer program, so like we're rebuilding gaming PCs and we'll have to test out the hardware. So I throw on Quake, just for the heck of it. Mm-hmm. And most of the time they're like, "What is this? And why? Like, why is it? Why is there leveling systems? Is there like a skill tree?" It's like, no, you just shoot stuff and you have fun. You rocket jump around the map, break it a little bit, have some fun, shoot monsters. Oh. And like, what about the multiplayer? Like, oh yeah, you check this out. You can do all sorts of 360s, like Ty was saying earlier.
Yeah.
And then they're like, wow, that just seems like too much. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? You're talking about like having like expansive skill trees and all this other stuff, but you can't handle a little bit of physicality.
But that's again, you come back to a game that's a strategic mind game compared to a fast-paced, skill-based game. Because I do think that if you took Quake Champions, renamed it, you're not going to get the old school Quake crowd in there unless they knew, oh, this is in secrecy a Quake game. But again, the old school Quake crowd is so small. Mm-hmm. So the big question, I think, is whether or not a game like Quake Champions actually benefits from this small crowd. Because again, if you named it something else, you probably wouldn't have had as many hardcore players join in first. But when they realized that this is Quake in disguise, they would still come in and kind of dominate. I think that's kind of the main thing. That everyone else who gets into try gets dominated, and you can't really, you need everyone to be on a level playing field when they start with the game, which is what they did with Overwatch. If you're a hardcore Quake player, you're not going to be especially good at Overwatch. If you're a hardcore Counter-Strike player, you're also not going to be especially good at Overwatch. You have to learn to play Overwatch. So maybe it was just too similar to, I don't know.
You have to
feel something else.
But man, the skill differential between players, man, once it starts to skew a little bit, man, your fun factor drops when you're getting your ass kicked.
I think we could spend forever unpacking the challenges that Quake Champions faced, but if I were to try to boil it down, I'll ignore all the obvious things like more people need to play it so that you can have more people in a lobby and all that kind of thing. There was people were really used to a certain way of playing that they didn't get. But if I'm going to boil it down to why didn't it capture a lot of the original, like OG Quake people, I don't think it's the champions necessarily. A lot of them will say things like, the problem with Quake Champions is the fact that it's got champions. But that's not, I don't even buy that. I think it really just comes down to, it is a game that primarily focuses on duel, and it also has quite a good TDM. And in fact, 2v2 is quite good as well until they discontinued it being ranked. And then when they brought it back, it was kind of too late. But with the way that people, enjoyed Quake, they kind of set yourself up when you have these champions with these abilities. Specifically, not even just like the powers that they possess. Like, that's fine if you want to spit on somebody or shoot flames. That's just another weapon in your tool belt. The way I see it is that the movement differences. So, like, when you have some characters that move like on a CPMA style movement, you have characters that do the Quake 4 skating style movement, and you have some characters that just do good old VQ3 style movement. When you play team games, especially something like Capture the Flag, which is like huge to people, or Clan Arena or Rocket Arena or whatever, you start to end up with some characters that just simply can't compete. And so you put yourself in an endless loop of trying to balance the characters. And I think that's a problem. It's not just a Quake Champions thing. Like, all of the games, even Overwatch, struggle with this, where you have to constantly keep, some players play just the meta characters, and some players want to stick to what they know. You have Quake 3 player like me, like I came from Quake 3, so I was like, yeah, I want to play Ranger, that makes obvious sense to me. Other players are like, yeah, I came from, CPMA, so I want to play as Sorlag all the fucking time. And you cannot compete with Sorlag as a VQ3 style movement player in something like Capture the Flag. So that mode fucking failed. I don't mean to like be harsh about it, but it did. It was like terrible. And
But I think, Ty, it did in terms of players like you.
Actually get that movement to work. I mean, the amount of mental effort that went into getting that to feel right.
And for duel, it works. For duel, it's fucking fantastic, man. It's just that when you have objectives and you have to like race with somebody, like if you were to implement defrag into Quake Champions, and you had someone going to play as Ranger and someone's going to play as Sorlag, no contest. It's not even. It's just physically not possible given the circumstances that we've given ourselves. So I think that's fundamentally why people can't get into it, because if they're not a dueler, there's no other competitive route for them to go.
Well, I think that kind of goes back to, you're speaking on behalf of the core players, the hardcore players, which would be such a small part of the demographic that would have to play a game like this. So if you cut all of those away, all these people who has the basic or the core skill set that you do when you get into a game like this, the community you represent, you're again talking about such a small subset of the players required to make a game like this successful. And it's everyone else you have to cater for. Like all these little details about, slight details in movement and so on. People who come in the first time and play a game like this don't care about that. They just care about having fun and having a hook that can keep them coming back.
All right, Dad, Dad, who teaches their kids about boomer shooters? Like, who is it? Not it's you that's telling your son to play it. It's not like this is already a niche genre. So if you want it to spread, you have to have it spread by word of mouth. It's not spreading by like huge esports budgets, unfortunately anymore. So you got to have that core audience who are already Quake fans to show their fans, like to show their friends and their families, like this is what's awesome, and
not
dominate them when you play together with.
Discourage them from don't call them boomer shooters.
What's that? Don't call them boomer shooters?
Don't call them boomer shooters.
Dave Osher is going to get so mad if
we're not the boomer. We're Generation X, aren't we?
Call them X shooters.
Yeah, you guys are Generation Extreme. Everything was extreme for you guys.
An X shooter.
Well, I was born in Alabama, so I'm automatically 10 years, but whatever generation I was born in, 10 years behind that. But back to you, Tim, because we kind of got
actually, but you have my Quake chair though, which is awesome.
I do like that.
Oh, that's cool.
I do like that a lot. But I am curious to know, like, when you look at any competitive game, you got all kind of shit going on right now. But what do you see that you can bring from the franchises that you worked on specifically to some of the projects that you're working on now? It's really interesting seeing you guys. I think you did you work on the Halo project at all?
No, not really. I mean, they just because it's such a not simple. Hold on, it's not simple to do, but the plan is straightforward.
Okay.
Because of Saber, we work on, like for instance, the Witcher port to Switch. Did not need design guidance. It just needed, super intelligent dudes that knew how to work a switch. So some of the things I try to stay away from,
right.
Because I'll just cause trouble. But some of the new titles, and we have a couple titles that we haven't announced yet. That one's a brand new IP. That's pretty cool. First person shooter game. Kind of back to what I was saying before. Making sure that you focus on the core elements of a game.
Right.
Lots of game designers throw the kitchen sink at a game. Figure out why it's fun. Work on that first, and then layer on top of that. Make sure that you keep the spirit of the game. Like if you're making a remake or you're trying to have a game that's inspired by another game, capture that spirit, capture that soul, focus on that. A lot of times getting scoped down is part of a designer's job. Many people think designers just add stuff to a game, but sometimes removing things is just as effective, probably more effective.
Wasn't it George Broussard who said cutting is shipping? I remember that quote from back 2009 from George Broussard. Good old Duke Forever days. Yeah. when he tweeted cutting is shipping.
Cutting sometimes is shipping, and cutting sometimes makes it better. Just today I had a conversation with one of the team leads, and he added some stuff to the game, and I was like, "Why are you adding this to the game when we haven't got? We're still working on the core." So it's just experience, knowing like because I've been working on this so long, I can see a problem in the grass before it jumps up and bites you. Just having that experience of making mistakes in the past and trying not to make those same mistakes again.
That's also the most valuable, experience any game designer can have. Most successful game designers who've had many successful releases over decades of time often don't know what not to do.
Right.
But those who've had both ups and downs, they have the broad spectrum of knowledge. They know what not to do, which is much more important of knowing what to do. Because if you know what not to do, you have a lesser chance of failure. Generally, you can focus on making a great work.
Failure makes you way more smarter. And remember that every great game designer, 9 out of their 10 ideas are really bad. So you just need to keep coming up with ideas because you're going to hit on one that's going to work.
So you mentioned the word like determining what makes it fun. To you, what makes a game fun? Like, what are the fundamental factors that you look for as the creative director?
That is a good question. Something that has a tight game loop where I'm constantly challenged and rewarded and then surprised by what's coming next. Having something that propels me to move forward. Why do I want to play this game? Is it because I want to do better, or is there a little carrot there? So that's really important. And I know that these are classic things that every game designer says, but a lot of games just forget about this. The simple loop that shoot, reload, move, have fun. Or find, collect, reward yourself, move on. Do something, pick up a piece of candy. Do something, pick up a piece of candy. And then if there's some type of emotional tie to games, I always find that to be exciting as well. The emotion, obviously, in a game like Quake is just the fear of someone getting a drop on you. But adventure games, there's story and there's emotion in what you do, and there's an emotion in the reactions that the world has to you. So for me, what makes game fun is, second to second enjoyment, a tight game loop, and then some emotional pull.
Mm-hmm. Tim, you came into the industry specifically by making your own maps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to work on, the Ultimate Doom and everything. I don't want to get into the history of oh yeah, you entered it in software and stuff necessarily because you've told it a million times. But what made you want to make maps, and how did you see the craft of that at that time?
Yeah. So my older brother, because I'm 48, and my brother is 6 years older than me. And so when I was a kid, he was playing Dungeons and Dragons with his friends.
Right.
And And I love the fact of, you get the modules, which were like DLC at the time. And, you would have, campaign, and you'd unfold the paper, and these are all top-down drawings.
Right.
You have top-down drawing of a little town, and then a little dungeon, it's on grid paper. I was fascinated by drawing paper Dungeons and Dragons maps and little towns and things, even though I never really played a lot of the game. So when the first Doom came out, because I never played Wolfenstein 3D because I didn't have a computer that could play it.
Right.
Which is kind of embarrassing to say that I never really played Wolfenstein 3D until I worked at id. But what was so fascinating about the game is that I could do kind of that Dungeons and Dragons map design, in a real world. And I distinctly remember thinking there's an infinite amount of things that I can build in this world. So building maps was truly amazing. The fact that you could build something and you could walk through it, for me is awesome. And I know it sounds silly, but it was, it really came down to building those maps, and then moving in this world and feeling like I could literally create anything I could imagine. Like if I was a kid when Minecraft came out, I would totally be one of those guys making these giant Minecraft worlds that you see. So that's why having tools, having games like Minecraft, where that allows young people to build these worlds, I know that there will be some amazing game designers that will come out of that as well.
So
that's kind of how I got started doing that stuff too with map making, was making stuff in Minecraft in creative mode, building whatever I wanted. But actually before that, it was Google SketchUp, learning how to model things in 3D and trying to draw maps from other games or whatever, even if it wasn't accurate to any degree. Just trying it out and going from there. But yeah, that idea of creating a world, possibly living in it, or having an idea for that world and be able to actually bring it to life. I'm like, oh man, I want to build a giant pit that opens up in the middle of a boss fight or something like that. You can do that. Why not? Or heck, if you want a giant pillar to fly through it too, why not?
Yes.
But yeah.
And it was so exciting that, and back then there was CompuServe, which is a BBS, and Software Creations. So because I was the poor kid, I had a Software Creations subscription because I couldn't afford a CompuServe. And uploading the maps, and then having there's a little forum page, and having people say, hey, this is a really good map, was huge motivation for me. To have someone else play something that I built and then text back or write back that it was awesome.
Oh yeah, it's one of the more satisfying feelings, definitely, when creating a map. But it kind of stinks when you create something like, oh, I love this, and then everybody's like, yo, this kind of stinks. So what's your
I have a dirty secret that I'm going to tell the world. So when I made maps for the Doom 2 Masters Edition as a contractor, id Software paid almost 3 times more than we were paying guys to make Quake Live maps 15 years later. So yeah, I remember telling Adam Pyle, I was like, man, this is embarrassing. I got paid more back in 1994 to make this map than we're paying.
But you guys were rare breed. Those who made maps during your time, you can almost kind of group them all together, and various degrees of age, of course. You have guys like Richard Gray, who is almost 20 years older than you, and then you have guys like you, and you have Cliff Basinski over on the Epic side of things, and all these great mappers. That was kind of the first generation of BSP, at least, true 3D mappers. And the accessibility was back then much the level was much more higher than it is today. Today, again, you can know Minecraft, and then my daughter can make something in that, and also with tools like TrenchBroom. Many of the guys we have working for us at Slipgate, they come from the TrenchBroom crowd. They never actually made maps in any professional tool, or even back in the day for that matter. They only made something in TrenchBroom for Quake, because TrenchBroom is super fast and easy, and they can exactly.
Actually, quick question: how long would it usually take you guys to compile, something like one of the starter maps? Because coming from somebody who uses trench broom, where you go, and you have all your blocks there, you have all the textures you need, you throw in. It's fire and forget with that, as long as you don't have any leaks, of course. And that's a whole other. But what it comes down to is like we have like now I have like an 8-core processor and 16 gigs of RAM. I don't have a problem compiling even large maps. What was like, but I can imagine it'd be a lot longer for you guys.
Painful. So when we were working on Quake 1, we had Next Step machines.
Yeah.
Which was
Steve Jobs machines.
Yes. Yeah. Which is there's still a lot of OS X. There's still a lot of Next Step in OS X. And when in Quake 1, you could drop polytopes down quickly. Okay. But if you wanted to change something, you had to select it. Okay. And I will never forget how long it takes. It took 6 seconds to render a scene in order for me to select something. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. So let's say you put some steps down, step, and you missed the top step, or you put some steps down and you just needed to shift the room over. Every time you wanted to select something, you had to render the scene, and it took 6 seconds. So in Quake 1, we didn't really do a lot of changing. Like if you wanted to shift the room, like sometimes you build one room and it's like 8 pixels off of a room, like way over there in the map. And then you change this room, which then affects the whole map to line up this room over here. We didn't do that shit in Quake 1 because it was so painfully slow. But when we would send it off to compile, we used a separate machine. That was, like at the time, a multi-core machine, which was awesome. But Quake 2 was the big problem because in Quake 2 we had radiosity, and radiosity light bounced 8 times. So if you made your map really complex, the radiosity pass would kill the compiling time. And the company got in Sun Systems Origins 2000 computer. I think that's the name of it. It was this big, giant blue thing. It looked like the size of a refrigerator. And at the time, when we bought that machine, I believe that we were like one of the top 50 companies in the world for compute power because we just needed to compile Quake 2 maps. And if you accidentally sent a map that was overly complex with too many bouncing lights, it could literally take you a day to run BSPM.
Isn't it fun how it's not much different these days with Unreal?
Yeah, that's true.
But again, like whenever we have a gigantic level in light mass, of course, if you have a swarm server, that's much easier. But we're talking the same. If a local guy at the studio with an 8 or 16 core computer has to compile light mass in a very complex level with production level of quality, it can take up towards 8 to 10 hours. So it's that part of it, at least, is still a very, very long process. But
yes, our rage maps took forever.
Yeah.
That was recent.
So on our show, all the time, we have guests that are, modern day Doom 2 mappers, and they love this. Like people like Dragonfly, people like Matt Tropiano. And I'm curious, from your perspective, having done so much of it, what do you see we can talk specifically in Doom or in a greater view of it. What do you see as what fundamentally makes a good single player map?
I actually have an answer to this question that's evolved over the last.
That's what I want to hear.
1,000 years. The like good, like for multiplayer, it's always good flow. So and then multiplayer, you have like your theme maps and your flow maps and your arena maps. In single player, you really want to know your objectives. Lots of times people give you the red key before they show you where the red door is. You want to clearly see your objectives. You want to kind of build up the intensity, and then end in kind of like a climax. You want to have a couple challenges. Like maybe 3 little map challenges or 3 kind of tougher, AI encounters. So clear objectives, unique and identifiable locations, so you know where you're going. something special about your map. Like if you think of, Quake 1, you're like, oh, that's the map of the thing came on the floor and it went into the wall and then the demon jumped out the door. And then some type of kind of build up that ends in this kind of rewarding finish. So clear objectives, identifiable locations, good pacing, cool end.
Okay.
Did you think about any of these things when you were making maps for Quake and Quake 2 and so on?
No, we were making this shit up.
Yeah.
No, we had no design. Yeah, seriously, there is not a single game design document that exists that and some people talk about, well, we have put these items here and these items there and this was really clever. It's like, we were just making this shit up. We had no idea. We just throw it in, play it, make sure it was fun. You high five each other and be done. Mm-hmm. If anyone tells you that we have some great design and vision, is ridiculous. It's just wrong. We are just running as fast as we can through the woods with our eyes closed, hoping we won't get hit a tree. We tried to be clever along the way, but please don't buy that we had some genius plan.
So earlier you said that every game designer has 1 out of 10 ideas is a good one, maybe, and we can actually now with our hindsight 2020 view go back through the original Doom and Quake and everything, and we can see how there's obviously some I don't know about this map, and then you get to the next map and it's like, holy shit, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Yes. Many of those maps happen to be yours, but it's really interesting to see the way that you guys were kind of just throwing it at the wall and you still ended up with just some absolute diamonds in there. And I think that when modern mappers talk about this kind of stuff, they like the legendary Doom mappers, the legendary Quake mappers, your name's going to get brought up a lot in that. And they refer to like this style map or this, they refer to a specific map from the original games and then elaborate on that idea down the line. And that became like an archetype, like this is an archetype for a style of map that can carry over into basically any other first-person shooter or any kind of level design. And you guys kind of laid down that foundation. I found it interesting that you said that came from, Dungeons and Dragons or like just a teenager making, basic architecture that pushed you into that direction. So I want to talk a little bit about the length of some of these levels because, do you feel that, because you mentioned like what you think the process should be, but how long should it take you to get to a goal, or what fundamental things stand between you and creating that? Like, does it need to be a longer combat loop? Does it need to have a routing or a finding? Do you like searching around a map, or would you prefer to just, as you said, have a straightforward, this is your objective? But I don't know. I think it's funny how you have these different styles of it. You have things like Jazz Jackrabbit Doom, which are just straight to the end all the way through. And then you have things that are like, you have to go find the key over here, and then you walk all the way back, and then you keep exploring the same area over and over again. That's something that, Fred, you guys are working on very, very well in Wrath, and I think it specifically comes from some of your maps. It seems like they've found this way to make you continue to use the same area over and over again while maintaining that same clear objective. I'm curious, like, where do you see that? I'm sorry, that was a really long-winded question. But
No. At first, I thought you were going to ask about the length of the maps, and then I was going to make comments about map sprawl.
Let's talk about that too, if you want to, if you have a point on it.
There probably is a science behind it. There's probably some really smart guy that wrote his PhD about how to design single-player maps, and so there is probably science. But I'm telling you, we just brute forced it. If it felt right, and it worked. We just kept trying it, and you play a map and it, that felt a little long. Yeah, I'll trim it. You play it again and you're like, oh, dude, that was way too easy. And then, well, we'll make it a little harder. But we just kept trying and trying and trying and trying until we got it right. And remember, back then, one guy could make a map,
right.
And now it takes like a whole team. Guys got a plan and stuff. And one guy's AI and one guy just lighting. That's ridiculous. But back then it was just like raw mental effort to try to get something that felt right.
Okay.
And then the first time you watch someone play a map, it's terrible. Your map is terrible.
Right.
And then you make those changes and you watch them play it again. And then you watch them play it again. Also, a challenge that most map most mappers struggle with is finishing a map. Maps are never done, so it does take a discipline to finish a map. So shipping a game is a great finisher for finishing a map. Man, I wish I had something clever to say.
Well, let me rephrase the question. Because I think you're going on a tangent that I didn't necessarily intend, and you can still go on if you want. But it's my fault. Trust me.
Wrong answer, Tim.
No, it's not the wrong answer. I don't think I made my point clear. You're speaking from like the perspective of then, and I'm curious, like, what did you learn from then that you would apply to something now?
Yeah. I mean, and I kind of hit on these things like clear objective, identifiable locations, pacing, good balance, weapon variety, item. Sometimes designers focus on one thing too much, and make sure maps are, not too long, not too repetitive. I think those are kind of the key things. And then some people just have a gift for it. Some people just are good mappers,
right?
And you can learn techniques, but finding the folks that are talented at creating maps really would help stand out.
I think Ty, it also kind of relates to which type of first-person shooter. Now, you mentioned a range of different types of games that do things in a different way, but what those games have in common are that they're first-person shooters, and pretty much everything else is kind of different. One game is an explorative type of game where you have to find a lot of things and discover lore and so on, and another is like a run-and-gun game where you just have to get from one to another. Yeah. But it's funny you mentioned that question, because one of the games we're working on right now, we're in this dilemma where we have it's announced at this point. In Graven, we have a lot of fantastic talented level designers, and we're actually kind of struggling to figure out how much should we as game designers direct them. So what we've done is we've just created a basic toolkit of, this is the story of your level, base story. You need to get this thing and give it to this guy. And this is the theme that takes place in this world, and this is the length and difficulty. Go nuts. But then we let the level designers be themselves, because we want to make sure that each level has the flavor of that level designer. That's why we got them on board, to bring their own personal flavor. So I think it's kind of in between. You need to direct them enough that they, difficulty has to be right. You have to pick up the correct weapons in the line, and you have to follow the story. But everything else, I feel, should be up to the level designer to get that personal flair. And I think that's what levels that Tim did. And that's why you, Ty, you can spot, that's a Tim level, clearly, because you can feel the flavor of the different level designers in the different levels.
Yeah. Yes. Tell an American McGee level, like, I got fucked over.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yes.
I can't remember who said it, but someone was like, you should always feel like if you die or you lose, it was your fault and not the game's fault. And man, he had another thing going on, a different philosophy.
Except for American McGee. If you die, it's American McGee's fault. Yeah. That's the philosophy of his levels.
Fine. That's fine.
Nah, it is what it is. But with that said, because Fred, I think you're like have some sort of telepathic communication with me. I wanted to know that as you transitioned into things like Strife and Hexen, where it's not the same thing, you have a little bit more story going on, and then we can tie that into a lot of the stuff that you're working on now. The way that level design has evolved so much, even in first person, not necessarily shooters, but games, where your objectives are no longer like find the key, shoot the cyber demon, that kind of thing. It's like we're telling a story here. How did you tackle that, or how do you look at that now?
You mean like the storytelling, like in Doom 3 storytelling, or
Doom 3 is a perfect example. That was going to be my when I said I'm going to tie it into something now. You now have
because Doom 3 is kind of fighting with itself. You have a very story driven linear game, but you also want it to feel like Doom.
Yeah.
Yes. That definitely was a challenge because of the technology. I mean, remember when we were making Doom 3, everything we were doing was new. Mm-hmm. No game had done the layers of the height map and the bump map and the specular and how they all work together in truly dynamic light for the world. Every light was a dynamic light, so everything was definitely a challenge. But we did try to tell more of a story, which then the polish that we did and the fine tweaking that we did on that game was truly amazing. I guess focusing on what's truly core to the experience of what you want to accomplish.
Right.
Do you want to tell a story? Do you want, or is it all? Is it strictly just puzzle based? Is it is it fear and terror? Are you trying to be funny in your level? So figure out exactly what you want to accomplish, and focus on those things. Because sometimes design, will wander, back and forth and not have clear focus. So I think, my advice to designers nowadays is, before you start a map, sketch it out. Just like take and it doesn't have to be very detailed. Just take a blank piece of paper and say, start, fun area, thing over here, end. That's all you need to do. It just helps you get your mind around it, and then helps you focus on what's really important and think, what do I want to accomplish in my map? What is this map? What's the feeling that I want to have in this map, and then focus on that.
Do you still have the urge yourself to kind of dive in and get your hands dirty?
I do. It's just time, and in the past when I've had an opportunity to work on some maps, I always say to myself, man, I could map circles around these kids. But yes, it's always fun. Even like on working on Rage 2 with the Avalanche team, it was fun at some time, sit behind some of the designers when I was busy in the office and just kind of really work on these maps, and like working with the team. There's this, one of the games that we haven't announced yet is a first person shooter that has some pretty classic level design in it. And, it's fun to sit down with the team and be like, this is what you want to focus on, here, this is working here, you want to move this over here, and this is why. So when I get a chance to do that, I really enjoy it.
Let's get Tim on the next 32 and 24. You can do it. It's just one day. You just knock a map out. It'll be great.
That's fine. I was funny. I was on a plane with Richard Gray, Level Lord, going from Dallas to London, and I joked with him. I said, we should make a map, and just make 8-hour flight.
Oh God,
it's possible.
I remember
talking with a game industry veteran map jam is what I want to see for like.
See,
Quake
that would be absolutely
just like
fantastic.
a 5-level map pack with a bunch of different kind of like a
I
less
have a funny
expensive
story
sigil.
about that for you. So DM6 in Quake 1, the map that looks like a toilet bowl?
Oh man,
It's funny. I'm actually reworking that for him.
I literally
So,
just
I'm looking
this.
at the geometry right now, and I'm like, oh man, I can't imagine what you guys
Yes.
had to do back
So,
to get that to work.
The origin of that map is Gabe Newell came down to id Software, and he was starting his new company, and he wanted to license the technology. And him and John were friends, and they were talking. And John walks him into my office, and Carmack, and he says, "Hey, can you show this guy how to make a map, and like how the editor works?" And I'm like, "Okay, And it was like new map. All right, make a square. All right, well, we'll try to make like this, make a ring, And so I kind of just put the basics down. And it's just going to get some flow, and he kind of watched me make a little bit of the map, and that was kind of the origin of the idea that turned into DM6. So it was a technology demo for
That is so annoying. That is my favorite map of all time, and you're just like, it's a toilet.
It's one of the more popular maps on any of like the free for all nights. Whenever I played with the Quake guys locally, it seems that one just sucks everybody.
Yeah, because it's so simple. All it is a figure eight.
Yeah,
but
it's
but
and meanwhile, I'm trying to design a map, and I'm like mirroring it, doing all these weird things, and then I'm looking at your map, and it's like, oh crap.
But that's how it is with most of the popular map. Like most of the popular, especially 1v1 maps, are something that was just a simple thing. Like you mentioned toilet seat. I remember. Do you guys remember Micro Machines for Sega Genesis? There was a toilet seat map, which was literally just a circle, and that was it. Like that's one of the funniest maps in that game as well. Like,
and I was gonna put 3 layers.
Yeah.
But it get too expensive.
Huh. Okay.
So I had to cut it off.
So we're getting the cart ahead of the horse. I want to ask one more question about single player maps, and then I want to go down the multiplayer map rabbit hole. Again, don't want to get too into the weeds with it, but I do want to know about like the design portion of it. So did you see when John put out Sigil? Did you like look at that or see any feedback on it? Okay.
No.
I was wondering.
Yes, I have better things to do with my day than play that.
So my question was going to be, had you seen it, was, when you say, like, I should do a map, seeing how that was received, do you feel like, oh shit, maybe I don't have the chops? But I think you do. I think you should make a map, and I think you should put it
No,
out.
trust me. Frederick knows how busy I am. I have no time. It'd be great if I could just stop time and then focus on something. But
I have
no,
a time machine right here, Tim. We'll just hit it, and
I will come and jump into that time machine. No, it would be great to do that.
Yeah,
it would. But man, we have so many games and so much stuff that we're doing, and things are moving so fast. No, I mean, I have hobbies that don't necessarily, involve making maps in my spare time.
that's good.
That is really, really smart, though. Like, that's one of the things I learned when I entered adulthood with kids and wife and the whole thing, was to get hobbies that are not necessarily related to games at all. Because previously your hobbies are related to games, and then everything becomes a big blur. And now, funny enough, when I was a teenager, the last thing I wanted to do was to do a hike in the forest or go to the sea or something like that. And now that's something you're looking forward to. Yeah. So that's really, really smart.
So do you guys want to see what my quarantine hobby was?
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Here comes the Quake map. Here it comes.
No. So when I was a teenager, remember I said I love, Dungeons and Dragons? Well, I would paint miniatures. So it's been like 35 years. And I thought, well, I should paint some miniatures. And what's so funny about when I was a kid painting miniatures and when I'm an adult painting miniatures is totally different. Like when I was a kid, I needed a red, and I had to like mix colors to get different red. Now I just buy all the reds, I had brown, just buy them all. So I bought Imperial Assault, which is an older Star Wars game. It's like, which actually goes back to the Doom 3 board game. The Doom 3 board game by Fantasy Flight had such amazingly great rule set that it eventually morphed into Descent, Journeys into something. And then they used for Imperial Assault, which then they made the new Doom board game with. So it's a board game. So I know that I'm an adult, but I painted Star Wars miniatures. Hold on, let me grab a few.
Fred just had the best business idea ever. Okay. Tim and Chuck, right? We have Chuck make the characters. Tim paints them. We sell.
Oh
them.
my God! That would be fantastic.
So I have, of course, the AT Walkers.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
I got these guys right here. I can't remember what their name. I got some Imperial Guards. I got some little lizard guys. I got all these little stormtroopers. I had to paint 9 of these. Man. And then like the ones with the red base are the leaders.
Yeah.
I think they. I even have. I have Luke before he's a Jedi, and I have
Vader, yeah.
Darth Vader. So that was my quarantine. So I painted 36 of these guys.
Oh my God.
While stuck in.
That's the best thing to do during quarantine is little projects like that.
All right, I'll ask the mother of all shit questions.
But I had a big magnifying glass because my eyes are. Because I don't actually wear glasses, but I can't see if I take my glasses off. So I have a big old man magnifying glass with a little light on it, which is funny. It's USB powered, so I can stick it onto my monitor.
Well, that's cool.
But you know what, Tim? I think this is kind of like destiny. We spoke with we had a podcast like this with Chuck Jones, who's currently working on Graven as a 3D artist. He spent his quarantine time modeling and 3D printing figurines for board games because he wanted to make his own board games. So yeah, we're thinking a team up could be pretty cool here. Chuck Jones will make them, and
I'll paint it up.
I'm telling you, man, take it to the bank, dude. That's the business. Forget all this video game shit, man. There's a lot of money right now, especially small groups. Less than 6 playing D&D.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did you play the original Cyberpunk RPG?
No, I did not, but I do know about yes.
Okay, you got to put your eyes on Witcher a little bit with Saber as you did the ports. And how do you see something like that? It will be 2-3 months, maybe a year and a half before they release it after we had this interview. But with a game like that, what do you see is like, this kind of ties into what I was asking about Strife earlier. The level design in that is totally different, and the enemy design is totally different.
The complexity, like, is there any upcoming game that's more complex than that? That's like breaking new grounds, I think.
As a creative director, how does your brain interpret a project like that?
Like which project? The Witcher project?
Cyberpunk.
Oh, Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk, yeah.
He's never even heard of it, guys.
It's like, what game?
It's the CD Projekt Red's new game, Cyberpunk.
Oh, that game. No, sorry. Cyberpunk.
No, it's cool. Yeah.
Yes. I actually saw it. They because we were working, with them. They made a comment about their first, because they have first person action in that game. And they're like, "Oh, we'd love to get your input." And I was thinking to myself, "Oh, I'd love to help you guys." So in that game, there's the hack way of getting through anything, and there's the combat way of getting through everything, and then there's the sweet talk way.
Yeah, sweet talk.
Yeah.
Yes. So and the AI is pretty situational. If I remember, I watched the demo twice because I wanted 2 jackets. I'm not sure. Like I would approach it by working on the hack way first, then adding the AI, and then making any adjustments to get through the third way to solve it. But I didn't see that. Obviously the AI is very complex and has to react to so many different things, because you can start hacking something, then engage in combat, then the AI needs to react to the change in the environment. So it's definitely challenging, and testing would be immensely difficult.
Yeah.
They must have an army plus another army just on testing that game, because you can screw with it so much. Like our old games, you run in and you shoot some guys. What can the AI do? But when there's literally 3 ways to get through every single encounter in a game that big, it's just scary to think about how much planning and thought went into that. So, those guys are definitely on a different level.
That's why I was saying previously, it's probably one of the most, if not the most complex game made to date, just in terms of pure scope and fidelity and complexity.
Yes, it's going to be crazy. Yes. Yes. Again, I've seen the demo twice, and both times they played through it differently. But I have not seen any insider information. But it is pretty awesome.
Tell Dylan Rogers to get his pen and pencil out for Gloomwood. That's the whole thing with that game too, is that you have the option to be stealthy or shoot or make these different decisions. I like that your idea was to have one route set out and then try to figure out the next one after you've figured that out. That's how
I would approach it. I don't know if that's how they did it.
Well, we're here to talk to you and reflect on your particular version of genius. So that's
how I would do it. Yes.
Same question as earlier, different object of the sentence. How do you think that what are the fundamental things that make a multiplayer map playable to you or good?
Yes. So multiplayer maps, there are they're kind of like 3 different types of multiplayer maps. Mm-hmm. There's the the flow multiplayer map. That's all about the flow. That's like DM6. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you have your location based multiplayer, and that's kind of like DM3. You got your little server room, you got your little courtyard, and so you're like, oh, I'm in this room, and you fight differently in this room. And then there's the theme based multiplayer where you have low gravity, or you have acceleration pads, or like some of the Quake 3 maps where we have like the vortex portal. So you first got to figure out which one you're making. Is it all about flow? Is it all about theme? Or is it very location based? Mm-hmm. And then you need to make sure that you balance your spawns, of course. So regardless of where you spawn, you're able to. Again, this is very arena based. I'm not talking like Call of Duty.
We're talking in our wheelhouse. We're all friends here.
You talk about language, don't worry.
Yeah, and then so you have your spawn. So you need to make sure you balance your spawn spots. Right. Most times people don't put enough spawn spots. I'm in the school of thought to put more in.
Yeah.
And then you need to make sure you just have your power up balanced by your protection, armor, health, or whatever that is, and then your weapon. So so you keep those evenly spaced. You make sure your spawn spots are good. You make sure you don't have any crazy dead ends unless there's a really good thing at the end of a crazy dead end. And then you start going from there. Make sure it's tight. If you're timed to engagement, if you consciously want a short time to engagement, make sure the map flows back into the areas where you're most likely to engage. And then don't try to design trick jumps. Yes. When people try to design trick jumps, shit never works. Like in Quake 2, The Edge.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite maps. I tried to design like 2 trick jumps, and some guy once told me that there were like 72 trick jumps in that map that you could do, and I'm like, oh, I don't even try to make 2. But if you try to do if you force in emergent gameplay in a map, it's not going to work.
Okay. Just
let that play out. Let the game systems and mechanics deal with emergent gameplay. Yes, quick to summarize. Pick out your theme, balance your weapons and items, get your spawn spots so they're not bad, and then figure out how fast you want to engage, and then build to bring people to where they'll meet each other. What
are your 2 trick jumps that you tried to put in?
It was the one to those boxes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what. You go up and then you can jump, and then up top there's that rail over to the courtyard with the rail gun in the water down below. Mm-hmm. Jump into that ledge. What was the other one? It's sad where I forget some of the maps that I made.
Yeah, none of that.
And that map was inspired by ledges, which just some random guy made for Doom 2 or Doom 1 as a mod map. Yes.
No, that's interesting. Because one of the most insane trick jump maps that I can think of in terms of just like single player duel maps or PvP duel maps would be DM6, and it has these insane jumps where you can go from the floor near the teleporter up to the second story and all kinds of crazy shit in that map. And you had no intention of that. I like that approach though. Yeah, it's really
well. Actually, clip rushes. So, in Quake 1, you can rocket jump into other rooms because rocket jumping hadn't even been invented yet until John Cash discovered it one afternoon, and so that's why in Quake 2 there's clip brushes and ceilings, because we learned that you can rocket jump into other rooms in Quake 1. Mm-hmm. So that's why you can rocket jump more in Quake 1, because we didn't design to prevent players from doing that.
Interesting.
Yeah, the only thing clever that I thought I did for DM6 was shooting the door to open it to get the lightning gun or the invisibility.
Another crazy trick jump is that when you shoot the lightning gun to make the door lift up, and then you can rocket jump off of the lifted door to get to the second floor as well.
Yeah, that's all game mechanics. That's just the game being cool.
I think it's amazing how you've made this career of creating these little 3D worlds that people can then do whatever the hell they want with and figure out and live their lives in it essentially.
And take it way farther than I ever imagined.
Yeah.
In relation to this, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Tim, generally about where the AAA Call of Duty type games are going in terms of level design, because many of them have a completely different philosophy where you don't allow the player to explore, and you don't allow the player to, and sometimes break the geometry of the levels. You want to make sure they're on this completely strict path, and you get all these scripted events because you want to see all the expensive stuff that these teams have made, which is a completely different type of game than what we're discussing here. What are your thoughts in general about how those levels are put together and the design philosophy?
So those guys have made it a science, and we had some former, Treyarch or Respawn or Infinity Ward, guys at id that talked us through kind of how they built, and there's a book and they got rules, and it is a science. They take fun and made it a science. Everything, avenues of approach and distance and what you can see and how the FOV affects, where your engagements are. It's truly amazing how perfected they made that experience. And so, you have to applaud that. They took, for us, we found the fun by brute force and just winging it. They found the fun through science and hard work and genius. And it's just, but yes, it is truly amazing how precise and those games are. And they're all fun. Like, they're literally all fun. I've played like all 32 of them and I love them all.
Yeah. It's a very different kind of experience because it's more of a, it's more of a laid back experience in terms of, you're turning off your brain and now you're taking through this blockbuster movie of a game where you see how incredible everything can actually be made if you spend all the money on making a pretty linear story-driven experience. Yes,
they're also good. And even the maps and the scenarios that you kind of guess are a little throwaway are so good. You have to applaud those guys.
Well, Tim, we're well beyond the agreed upon time, so I would just want to say, if anybody has any last final questions before Tim has to get out of here.
I do have a quick question, and this one is for somebody else I know that's designing maps. They know who they are, and they might be embarrassed, that's why I'm not going to mention them by name. They know who they are. They're probably smiling right now as they're listening to this. But anyways, they have a hard time, and I do too, with, like you mentioned before, with focus, making sure you start from the ground up. Just, do you have any suggestions for streamlining? How do I word this properly? Streamlining, like, say for instance with Trench Broom, like we're just designing Quake maps. Do you have any? Crap. Let me find the wording for this.
I love how nervous you get.
Just watch Map Sprawl, because map designers will make something and they'll end up like here and they're like, oh shit, how do I get back to here? And then they have to build a bunch of stuff.
Because the problem is I get. Okay, I think I have. How do you prevent yourself from going into detail and then wasting time doing details and stuff instead of focusing on the overall map design? 'Cause I have a problem where I want to have everything in the map, then I want to test it out.
Well, that's the fun part. That's the details.
Yes. Yeah. Well, like I said, draw it out real quick. Be conscious of map sprawl. Don't worry too much about detailing it all out. But I'm the same way. I I'll over detail an area and then I'll make gray boxes.
My background is from I took a bit of it was funny when you were not necessarily ripping on the animators, but you were totally telling the truth. The animators. I went to school for animation, some prerequisite courses, but I did a lot of layout design, so a lot of scenery and stuff like that. So when I saw level design come forth, I'm like, I'm just drawing in 3D, and it's the exact same concept. So blocking it out, getting all the shapes down. So it's been having that kind of background really helps. Like, do you have any suggestions for people that don't have a strong background in, like, I guess layout design? Because a lot of layout design goes hand in hand with level design, especially if
just make something you're familiar with, and then put gameplay in it. Please don't make your school. But make some other building that you're familiar with, or some other area that you feel comfortable in. And
for school, just make sure it's like a nice little like physics simulator or something.
Yes.
We don't need to.
Yes. Okay. But just build a layout that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable in, and then constantly think about map sprawl. Be careful if you head way on here, because then you have to get yourself all the way back here. And then draw it out first and set a timeline for yourself. Give yourself 3 weeks to get it done. Or
that internal deadlines is a really good thing. I also think Haducant, as Tim mentioned, one of the main challenges for mid-level designers is to actually finish their level. And I think a lot of that ties into the fact that many of them likes to detail early. With all of our maps, we have a very strict workflow or pipeline in terms of level design. Everyone, even those who are not familiar with it, they have to start by sketching up. Then they have to start by blocking out. They already script, place ammo, place AI, and so on during the block out before there's a single texture or any, static mesh or anything at a level. And that's the phase that we're constantly iterating on. And for many level designers, that's not the fun part. For level designers, because that is the design, all the pretty stuff afterwards. it's the most disciplined part. But then when that's done, when you have something that just feels extremely good and very tight and fun to play, then the fun part comes where you can add all the little leaves of grass and all the nice textures, and it is, I think, discipline first and foremost. I'm the same. Like when I was mapping, I would like make a little room and then I want to add the lights and the particle effects and like all the things for that little room, and then you don't get further.
Well, it was a pleasure talking with you guys. I had a good time.
Really appreciate
thanks
it.
very much.
Pleasure is all ours, man. Thank you so much for joining us, Tim. And thanks for wanting to talk to Ty and Haducant. They are huge fans, and they grew up with your work, and so did I. So I'm sure it was a big moment in their careers to get to talk to you here.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it. You guys have a good afternoon.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Take care, man. Talk to you later.